You've probably heard of target date funds. They're an investment option inside just about every employer-based retirement plan. They tend to be popular because for the novice investor, they offer a set it and forget it approach to investing. Here's how they work. You begin by picking the target date fund that aligns with the year in which you plan on retiring. So let's say you're currently 45 and want to retire when you're 65. That's in 20 years. So if this year is 2025, you'd pick the target date 2045 fund. Target date funds then use glide paths, basically an age-based formula that determines the mix of stocks and bonds over time. And while this formula isn't standardized across all target date funds, they all do generally work in the same way. Let's break it down. As you approach the target date of your retirement, the fund gradually reduces stock exposure and gradually increases bond exposure. In your early years, say 30 to 40 years from retirement, you're likely to have 90% allocated to stocks and 10% allocated to bonds. As you approach retirement, that allocation might shift to a more conservative allocation, say 60% stocks and 40% bonds. When you hit your retirement date, you'll shift to an even more conservative allocation, like 50% stocks and 50% bonds. Once you move into retirement, your allocation will eventually drop to as low as 30% stocks and 70% bonds. And the brilliance of target date funds is that this gradual shift to bonds happens automatically. It truly is set it and forget it. And while this sounds like a great hands-off approach to investing, it does have a couple of big drawbacks. First, there's an underlying assumption in all of these target date funds that the closer you get to retirement, the more bonds you should have in your portfolio. The rationale is that you don't want to be in a position where the market drops and you're forced to access the money while the market is down. This is an entirely justified position. After all, if you spend your stock market assets while they're down, you could send your portfolio into a death spiral from which it never recovers. As anyone who retired in 2000, 2001, or 2002 can tell you, this is precisely the scenario they faced. This is what we refer to as sequence of returns risk. So what's the problem, you may be thinking? Sounds like target date funds are the ideal way to shield yourself from a drop in the market during retirement. Since your portfolio will have a much larger allocation to bonds, you won't see quite as large a drop in the market. As a result, you'll have less exposure to market risk and a lower likelihood of succumbing to sequence of returns risk. A lot of the problems with target date funds come down to sustainable withdrawal rates in retirement. Allow me to illustrate. Let's assume that you want to stick to the gold standard for retirement distributions, the 4% rule. The 4% rule says that you can withdraw 4% of your day one balance in retirement, adjusted every year thereafter for inflation. So if you have $1 million in your stock portfolio at retirement, you can take $40,000 that first year. The second year, you can take $40,000 plus 3% for inflation for a total of $41,200. And you can keep following this course year after year over a 30-year retirement and maintain a high likelihood of never running out of money. Here's the problem. The 4% rule assumes that you maintain a 60-40 stock bond allocation throughout retirement. If your glide path in your target date fund reduces your allocation to 50-50 and eventually 30-70, your portfolio won't be productive enough to maintain a 4% withdrawal rate. You might start at 4%, but your underlying portfolio won't grow enough to maintain that rate of distribution throughout a full 30-year retirement. The math just doesn't hold up. So a target date fund is fundamentally incompatible with the 4% rule. But remember, the 4% rule is actually the most expensive way to make sure you don't run out of money in retirement. You may be better off figuring out what your retirement shortfall is and then buying a guaranteed lifetime income annuity to help bridge your income gap. Here's how that works. Let's say you have a $100,000 lifestyle need in retirement. Let's also say you have a $20,000 pension and $30,000 coming from Social Security. Let's also assume all of these numbers adjust for inflation. The guaranteed lifetime income approach says instead of using the 4% rule to bridge that $50,000 retirement shortfall, let's use a guaranteed lifetime income annuity. And while you would need $1.25 million in your stock portfolio to produce $50,000 per year based on the 4% rule, you would likely need much less if you used a guaranteed lifetime income annuity. That number varies based on prevailing interest rates, but these days it's probably much closer to $800,000. So not only do guaranteed lifetime income annuities give you a 100% likelihood that your money will last as long as you do, but they can free up a bunch of extra money in this case $425,000, that you can invest in the stock market. Why the stock market? A couple of reasons. Because 100% of your living expenses are accounted for, you won't need to draw money out of your stock portfolio in the year following a down year in the market. You have the luxury of watching your portfolio recover before you take further distributions. This gives you permission to spend and also permission to take much more risk in your stock market portfolio. And because of that increased exposure to stocks, you increase the likelihood that your money will last the full length of your 30-year retirement. In summary, the big problem with target date funds is you won't be able to take advantage of the 4% rule, and you certainly won't be taking advantage of a guaranteed lifetime income approach to meeting your income needs in retirement. After all, you're on a glide path. You're on cruise control. It's set it and forget it, and that isn't conducive to evaluating the strategies that will help you wring the most efficiency from your retirement savings. I'm David McKnight. Thanks for watching.